Fighting games come in all sizes, from big-budget blockbusters to smaller cult favorites, like the one whose story we're telling today. I had a chance to speak to some of the members of Mane6, developers of them's fighting herds, to learn about the amazing story behind their game and to take a look into just what it takes to make an indie fighting game with an unusual cast.
I've been gaming for about as long as I can remember. My dad worked with computers, so we had a bit of a computer graveyard in our basement. And I always played around with the machines. And back then I would find a bunch of these like gigantic floppy disks with games on them. Included in the piles of old disks were some weird sort of DOS versions of fighters. Like I had a DOS version of Street Fighter 2 that I found later on. Since then, I've always found the idea of fighting games interesting because I've always been a thinker. So combat has always just kind of worked out that way because everything you do is directly in response or anticipation of your opponent. And that kind of struggle is eternal, and you get an infinite amount of possibilities that way. Like no two matches are ever quite the same because you've learned something about your opponent, they've learned something about you, and depending on what the game provides to you in terms of tools and mechanics and all that stuff, you can kind of explore and exploit different aspects of it and use that to take down your opponent. Then they can bring it back on you, and it's just a back and forth, endless struggle. It's like a little war zone.
My brother is much older than me, so he's technically my half-brother, but we grew up at the same time, so we're pretty much just brothers. His tastes were very dark metal inspired, so we played a lot of Killer Instinct and SNES, we played a lot of Mortal Kombat, we played, as we knew it then, Darkstalkers 3, but it's Vampire Savior. For me, it was all about self-improvement, because if you get good at a fighting game, you start to play at a different level than everyone else, and you experience the game at a different type of way, where when you learn the mechanics, and you're playing somebody else who knows them too, there's a different type of game that goes on rather than just people button mashing. And as you get better at the game, those people who used to be at your same level will no longer be at your level if they're not improving as well. So it was more about, I want to play these games that I love at the highest mechanical demanding level that they're at. And when I started going to locals for that, that was my way of not only learning how to get better, but being exposed to new things about the game and learning more about how the games worked and getting better at those games.
No! 2 for 5, Oreo cookies.
Can he get out?
He got the cookies.
He's not going anywhere.
Oh!
I played a lot of 2D platforming, action games. I played a lot of strategy games, like Blizzard's, StarCraft, Warcraft. It was both the art and the mechanics. I've always been fascinated with design as well. Animation was, I guess it all stemmed from when I was just a wee lad, I would play with action figures and try to create a story out of that just in my head. And that sort of evolved into sort of a penchant for chronicling the story as a comic. That eventually evolved into animation. I wasn't really doing animation until I met Omari, until high school. That's when I actually started attempting to animate. And I never really took any art classes or anything. I've mostly just been self-taught since that moment.
While the members of Mane6 were interested in gaming in one form or another, they were also connected by something else. They all had an affinity for the show Friendship is Magic, an animated show based on the My Little Pony toys from Hasbro, created by Lauren Faust.
I had an online friend who just linked me the first episode of the Pony Show, Friendship's Magic, just out of the blue. I had no prior lead up to it. I had no idea what the show was. I went in real skeptical. I was like, what is this? The first episode didn't really floor me. I was like, all right, well, I guess I'll watch the second one. And the second one hooked me. I was like, whoa, these are some mature themes that are being talked about. For some reason, I actually really enjoy the story that's happening here. I enjoy the characters.
Well, the show had a lot of character to it. There are a lot of things about cartoons where you kind of fill in an archetype, and that's kind of where you stop. With My Little Pony, every character had major and visible flaws to them, and the show was about them working through those flaws and despite having these issues, becoming friends. And if you don't face the fact that you are not a perfect person, it's going to be difficult to move forward. And I found that rather unique about the show.
It had an uncommon quality to it that shows about selling toys to kids didn't have. Lauren made sure that the characters had depth to them. They all had jobs, they were all 20-somethings, they all had hopes, dreams, fears, complex emotions, motivations for doing things. And it was a show about friendship, like something so mundane yet so important at the same time. This was a show about how do you not be a jerk to people and how do you cultivate relationships that last a long time. It was enriching content for a lot of people and me too. So absolutely, the show it had a lot of great life lessons in it, and I can absolutely understand why it's so popular.
Back in the community of bronies, when we were watching the show, I was always drawing, various characters as fighting game characters, and I made little animations of sort of Marvel vs. Capcom style mashups and stuff like that. I was like, oh, it would be really cool if, like for fan art, we made a game, like a fighting game. That would be weird. Like, who would be crazy enough to do that? And like within a week or two, I started seeing this other artist making screenshot mock-ups of a Marvel vs. Capcom style pony fighter. And it all looked really slick. It looked like it was actually a screenshot out of a game. It was really clean. Shortly after that, someone made a thread of actually making this a real thing, inspired by those screenshots. I was like the second reply to that.
He just dropped the link to this like forum where they were talking about getting a team together to make this game into one of the chats, and I just decided to check it out because I've always wanted to make games. Like I was always just sort of testing out like different engines and like doing little things and not really ever finishing them, but always like poking around and testing my mettle for making games. And I was like, I really want to see what it's like. I want to like see what it's like to be on a team, to like contribute to like an actual project, even if it's like not paid or it's volunteer work. I want to like break into that and I want to see what it's like. So I was like, hell yeah! Like I clicked that link so fast.
What better way to make a piece of fan art than to make it a playable piece of fan art? There was a lot of creativity going on in the fandom. It was something I'd not really seen before, and it was really inspiring. So figured we toss our hat in and see what we could do.
Omari and Luke would go on to join others interested in creating this game, later known as Fighting is Magic, and forming the group Mane6. Their goal was to create something that stayed true to the show's characters, while also taking cues from some of their favorite fighting games like Tatsunoko vs. Capcom and Melty Blood. Of course, being an independent team with zero funding limited their development options, so they turned to an old fighting game engine called Fighter Maker 2K in the hopes that it could help them achieve their dream.
Fighter Maker 2K is an ancient engine, and by the time we had started working with it, it was already over 8 years old. It wasn't really a tool that was made to be expandable. It's just kind of you drag and drop a lot of things. Most of what people did with it was the same thing they did with Mugen, is you just kind of drop in your favorite Street Fighter characters and Mortal Kombat, and you just kind of slap them together, and occasionally they would be able to hit each other properly. We definitely wanted to do a bit more than that. And the difficulty of using that engine really came to a head when we looked through all of the community forums for it and found that the things we were trying to do with it were already out of scope. So a lot of the stuff that we ended up having to do with it was learning how to sort of fake what you're trying to do on our own. It was a huge learning process.
Real talk, Fighter Maker was ass. It was no good. It did what it was supposed to at the time, but there was a lot of times where we would find something and report it over to Omari, and he would just say, that's Fighter Maker, I can't do anything about it, I'm sorry, it is what it is. I remember the game had a problem with corners. Left corners and right corners just didn't operate the same way. And so I was like, what can we do about this? And the answer was, I don't know if we can do anything about it, this is just how it is.
He absolutely respected the engine for being restricted, but he also hated it for being restricted. Because when it's restricted, you don't go overboard, you don't bloat development time, there's things that you can do and things that you can't do, and you have to stick to your box. And that makes things faster, easier in some ways. But it also, like, your remorse that, like, there's certain things that you'll never be able to fix.
We were aiming for an initial release with the first 6 characters. For starters, we were just gonna put this one out. As soon as your game's out, it's out on the internet. People can just play it.
Oh man, the first video that we dropped, we were like, yeah, we're probably gonna get like 50 views, and then it was like 500K in 3 days, and we're just like, what's going on? And that really kicked things into high gear. Wow, like we can make a game, like we are doing this, like we may have what it takes, like we have some potential confirmation here, like let's run with it.
It was overwhelming, but it was inspiring because at that moment we realized we made some kind of a connection. And we now were obligated to do something with this, do something for real, and take it all the way through to the end.
The team would continue pushing towards the game's first release, occasionally sharing gameplay footage and other insights with the Brony community to continue drumming up excitement very carefully. While being a project born out of fandom and purely driven by volunteers, the team knew the risk of attracting too much attention. Unfortunately, an early build of the game was leaked by a member of their QA team. This leaked build would go on to be featured in a donation drive for EVO 2013, in which the game that had raised the most money for breast cancer research would be featured as the final game in that year's lineup. While many fans were trying to support the efforts of Mane6 by getting their game into the largest fighting game event in the world, they were in fact pinning a target on the game's back as it was now being associated with money in a highly publicized situation. A target that Hasbro would take aim at in February 2013 when they sent Mane6 a cease and desist, effectively killing the game.
I mean, at that point, we had been working on the project for about 3 or so years. We were on the home stretch of kind of finishing up the last character, cleaning things up, and doing our first official release. Needless to say, I was pretty torn up about it. We were so close. Like we were doing, I feel like we were doing a lot of things as clean as possible, making sure that everyone knew this is a fan project, it's just fan art. We're not trying to make money off of this. We're not aiming for fame. It just happened. But at the end of the day, we just wanted people to learn about these characters and have fun. As soon as you get a letter like that, there's not really much of anything you can do. All the work up to that point, because you had no official release, was just done. It was gone.
I guess like we all knew it could happen, but we never really thought it was going to. So when it did, it was an emptiness. It was a horror that set in for a bit. As the days went on, there was a little bit of panic in trying to potentially reach out to Hasbro and maybe get something going that did not end in the project dying. But as it came to a close, we realized that that's never gonna work, like no way.
We were doing this purely out of fandom of the show. Without the show and its fandom, we felt we had nothing left to kind of move forward with, especially since what we were building this on was just a drag and drop engine. We felt there was no real transferable skill or gameplay that can come from it. Even if we were to start from scratch and make up our own sort of, pony OCs or whatever, it just wouldn't have the passion and the impact that it could possibly have if we were doing the original project. There was basically nothing left at that point.
I had followed the game enough to know how long they had been working on it, how far they had gotten, and how close they were to completion. And my heart just broke for them. I feel like just as a creative person and as an artist and knowing what it feels like to, work yourself to death for, a project of passion, and then to just have it crumble in your hands like that is just heartbreaking. So just kind of on a whim, I just tweeted, hey, do you want some original character designs? And I just kind of threw the offer out there on Twitter.
I was like steeling myself for the long haul. I gotta remain positive. We can keep this knowledge. We can go for it. And Lauren Foss is tweeting us new characters. What? Out of nowhere.
It was honestly one of my favorite fan projects going when it was happening. And the thing that really caught my attention was that the fighting was in character. So I think anybody could take like a cute little kitten and give it a machine gun and, oh, that's hilarious, because it's, you know, it's ironic, it's opposites. And that would have been like kind of the cheap way to go. And they didn't do that. They went, Twilight is very studious and a reader, so we're gonna make her beat people up with her books. And that really impressed me, and that's why I enjoyed it, but also just had like mad respect.
You know, first glance, nobody believed it. And then we were like, wait, that's actually her. She's actually saying this. Are we gonna do this? Like, are we really gonna do this? And there's a whole lot of discussion. But what mattered the most is that we respond to it and just see where things go. And so we did.
The nature of the cease and desist would force Mane6 to start completely from scratch. So as Lauren was working on new characters, the team was looking for a new engine to build this new project on. They would get some help from fellow indie developers Lab Zero, creators of Skullgirls and the upcoming Indivisible, who offered to give their Z engine to Mane6 as a stretch goal in their crowdfunding efforts for an update to Skullgirls. At the end of the campaign, Lab Zero would raise over $828,000, and Mane6 had their new engine.
It was a complete change, like 100%. Going from a drag and drop engine to a real scripting language with no prior experience was quite an undertaking. The Skullgirls engine was essentially me going through a college course, learning how to do everything from scratch again. I had a base to work from of the previous game, of kind of where I wanted the characters to end up mechanically, but how to get there was something that I had to learn on the fly.
As Omari figured out the engine, we figured out what would happen if the engine went wrong. When it was announced that we'd be getting the engine, I learned Skullgirls. I had just a passing interest in the game before, but I was like, hey, I should familiarize myself with the game itself. That way, if anything weird crops up that's from Skullgirls, I'll recognize it. But in general, it's much more helpful to work in Skullgirls, because if I say, well, it would be great if this could happen, as long as we have the time to develop it, it can happen. There's no limitations. It's just what is in our scope. It does require that I take a little bit of my own personal interests in what I like in characters and sort of leave them at the door and say, okay, I'm testing something where I may not like all the characters, but it's his vision and I have to uphold it. So it's important that I get inside Omari's head and figure out what he's looking for so I can make sure that that vision is coming out in the gameplay. And I do have characters I prefer in the game based on my own personal play style, but I sort of have to become more multivarious than I would as a tournament player and learn the entire cast in order to properly know what my deck of cards is when balancing characters against others and making suggestions based on what could possibly happen in the game when characters and their mechanics clash against each other.
The character design work took a good while. There was a lot of iterations. We were trying to figure out a style to kind of land on. It was about a year and some months to get something that was presentable. At that point, we only had about a character and a half to show. We definitely wanted to make sure that the first showing of this new game with new characters had as final a set of character designs as possible. We had to make sure that all the trust that has been put into us from the fandom and from Mike Z and everyone who believed in us was founded. Of course, Lauren works on cartoons, and the whole concept of game design was totally alien to her, and vice versa for us. We worked on a game, but we never worked on a show, so sort of translating the languages across was a bit tricky at first, but we eventually kind of got a flow going. She knew that we wanted characters that could work in similar ways to the 6 characters we were originally going to make, but it was very important that they weren't the same characters. There are a lot of things you can do with an archetype without just repeating yourself, and I think we hit a bit of a nice balance, especially when it comes to the stories that we'll be eventually telling about them.
I really just followed their lead. So at a certain point, they just started asking me for stuff, and I'd just go like, yeah, I can do that. Oh, hey, can you write a little blurb about this character that we've created? Yeah, sure, I can do that. In a weird sort of way, they were, the team were my directors because I wasn't creating the game. But what was great was that they said, we need these characters to exist in a world. And I sat down and just figured out the basics, just figured out like the main crux of like what kind of world they lived in, why are they talking animals, why are they fighting, that sort of stuff.
Pink highlights? So last season. Pretty hair won't save our world.
It saves my world, right?
You should be able to explain who your character is and what they do quickly. That doesn't mean that they should be shallow. It's just that like the basic of them is something that you should be able to communicate quickly. And as a character designer as well, I feel the same way as far as art goes, that you should be able to take one look at a character design and take a pretty good guess of who that character is, what their personality is, and sort of riff for yourself. And your audience should be able to get pretty close with one look or one, maybe 2-sentence description of who a character is. And, sometimes you lean into tropes to do that. You don't want to fall back into stereotypes and you don't want to be repetitive. I like to take tropes and then put a little twist on them that might make them a little unexpected.
These are a few of my favorite things. Kicking, stomping, and kicking.
I remember the first time I animated some of the stuff for like Velvet. She was the first character we worked on. I was super, super nervous because Lauren would come in and take a look at the first couple of animations. And when she said, looks good, that's literally, she had like barely any feedback. She was just like, looks good. And I'm like, okay. I was completely stone-faced because I expected to come in here and just destroy it. Just like this and this and this is wrong. You need to you need to work on that. Like that looks really weird, but she's just like, yeah, it looks fine. And I'm just like, that's not what I expected, but that's awesome. I'll just keep going.
They had worked on it for 3 years before I was ever involved. I mean, I just feel like that would have been really mean. It just would have been really disrespectful. I was there to help. So I didn't want to take over, but it's also a case of like, I was impressed by what they had already done. So it's easy to let go when the person who's going to run with it is going to run with it well. I mean, they don't animate like amateurs.
Since the original characters that we'd worked with were also Lauren's designs, it sort of was slightly second nature. They're just different species, but they all had 4 legs. They all had a neck. It's just that we couldn't use the same model from character to character again because all the pony characters had literally the exact same body. It was different models, so we had to build the different models. So that was the first challenge. Was it took 6 times as long to build the puppets, to animate them. I think the only hurdles that I had was probably with Tianhuo, because she was the most different out of the cast, being a rigid noodle with like special effects wings that did karate, or like kung fu, like doing martial arts with a human being is one thing, and that's immediately what pops to mind. Like when you're animating, you usually just play something out in your head and you try to sort of copy that in a way. Translating that to a 4-legged character was very difficult because they have 4 legs, not 2 legs and 2 arms. And Omaria always helped ground me in that case because I'd always have trouble like with Tianhuo, like, oh man, how are we gonna, like, what? And he's just like, just pretend she doesn't have arms. She just has nothing but legs. And I'm like, but I still have to somehow show the like, it's gotta shine through at least, but there's other pieces you can use, like the head and the neck basically become a huge point of, like a focal point of interest and where it connects to the shoulders. So you can definitely use that as kind of a workaround for like missing arms.
Our characters are shorter than usual and they're wider than usual. So a lot of the combat came down to a lot of really deep cross-ups and spacing that way, rather than having tall, large characters take up most of the screen. And so having this much screen space to work with and kind of moving around kind of helped inspire a lot of really fun and silly animations and allowing the characters to have more unique movement options from each other. So like in our game, for example, we have an ice deer and her movement mechanic is skating. So if you dash forward and crouch, you can slide forward while blocking, and same thing for backward. And kind of mixing that character in with another character who basically stepped out of Marvel and can fly around and air dash, it's a fun challenge, and it makes for both a visual and mechanical experience that we just wouldn't really be able to mess with as heavily if they were just regular two-legged characters. When everyone is crazy, then no one's crazy. A game doesn't have to be completely balanced as long as it's fun, but still having everyone be crazy is a lot better than having just a few people be crazy.
We want to make sure everybody's still fun. So if people find something that's fun, we don't want to take away their fun, but we just want to bring everything in line so not one character is just doing something that nobody else is allowed to do.
With the game starting to take shape, Mane6 was on their way to creating what would become them's Fighting Herds. But they had been working for close to 4 years in total without any pay and knew that had to change if they were going to have any chance of succeeding. So they took a page out of Lab Zero's book and started a crowdfund of their own.
It came to the conclusion of just like, we don't have any money, we don't have any investors, so we need to make investors. What's the best way we can make investors? We could crowdfund. That's investors. Normally when you get a big investor, like a big single or just a couple of really big investors, they tend to ask for a lot of creative control. We definitely didn't want to give up creative control ground, so we thought that the crowdfund would be the best way to do things, and we settled on that pretty quickly.
We had no idea if people would want a new game with different characters. We didn't know if people were so fickle they would say, oh, there's no more ponies, I don't care anymore. So we had literally no idea, no projections we could possibly make before we started the Kickstarter campaign. So it was more of just a mad scramble of let's do the best we possibly can before we do it to increase our chances of maybe staying afloat, because hope was there, but it was a sliver.
The 3 months leading into the crowdfund was quite the crunch. We were just kind of like, we don't really know what's going on. I guess we're just sort of working on the new game. Here's some stuff for the new characters, yada yada, for like a year leading into that. But then we were just like, crowdfund's coming, wham! Three months prior, we did so much work. When the game went up on the crowdfund, pressing that button was terrifying, absolutely terrifying. We were all just like crammed into like a single Discord call or something. And money just started flying in. And we're like, whoa, that's awesome. But you know, after the 3 days goes by, you enter the drought stages until the final 3 days. And that's what really hit us the hardest. Like we started panicking around that point.
It actually put a lot of us in the hospital. Our UI designer, he ended up getting a stroke. I think something happened to one of our musicians. After our crowdfund ended, a week later, I got a staph infection. I guess my immune system just didn't handle all the stress very well and I ended up in the hospital. So it really took a toll on us. I ended up donating $1,000 to the campaign itself because I was worried that we wouldn't make the limit we had to in order to get the funding. And I didn't tell them beforehand. And so we were all in a group call and I did it and didn't put a name down. And they were like, someone donated $1,000 and didn't put a name down. It must be a troll, refund it, refund it. And I was like, no guys, don't do that, it was me, shh.
For several weeks straight, I was like constantly found myself pacing back and forth between on the rooms, like what should we do next? How should we get ahead of this? Like where can we be proactive to make sure that we get as close to success as we can, even if it ends up all for nothing. We didn't even hit it until the last 3 days, and then we exceeded it. We were so scared until that point. Oh my gosh.
The fandom showed overwhelming support for the game. You know, that was the only reason why the crowdfund was so successful, is because when they announced that they needed money for Fightin Herds, everybody came out and helped. The fandom wants this content to be made. They believe in this team as well, and the support was overwhelming.
It was like we passed our final exam. We turned in this huge project to prove that we were capable of getting the diploma. It was one of the biggest feelings of relief that a lot of us had ever had, because at this point, we had been working on this project for about six-ish years, counting the first one, and this was our chance to not only finish what we started, it was our chance to sort of prove that we were in it for the long haul. We finally had a project that was our own, and there's nobody to kind of shut us down because it's our characters. There's nobody to stop us because we have all the support. We can actually do this. It became real.
Mane6 finally had funding, allowing them to expand and pay their staff and continue working on their vision for Them's Fighting Herds. A vision that extended past just the fighting game. Things like a story mode, tutorials, online lobbies with full pixel art and collectible hats, and even a giant multiplayer Salt Mines mode that pitted players against various NPCs and a player-controlled boss were now possible. Some of these additions, however, would lead to delays, and to keep themselves from slipping further, Mane6 needed some help.
Managerial stuff on the project was always kind of a mess. We were still sort of operating in that kind of like a couple of pals working on a game mode, because we didn't know anything else. None of us had ever really worked in a professional like game development environment, so we were just kind of flying by the seat of our pants. And there was always something, like a nagging feeling of just like, things are messy. Inter-team relations are messy. We don't really like dealing with them. Like, we need somebody to like manage this stuff, somebody to, and we never really had like the funds or like just the motivation to like hammer that home. So when we met up with Aaron again, that was kind of a godsend.
The developers are personal friends of mine. We went to high school together. They were making this game in the background that I didn't know about it at the time. I was doing my thing, they were doing theirs, but when I came back from school, I got reconnected with them and I saw how far the game had come and I fell in love. I believed in the project, I knew it was going places, but at the time I was working for other companies, I had a full-time job, so I would just lend some help here and there as I could. Over time, that transformed into the role I have now, which is production manager, because I started to get more and more involved in the project. I started noticing how important my help was to them, and I made a decision one day that I needed to do it full time because I wanted to see the project succeed. I love the game and my friends who are working on it, and I want to do everything I can to ensure its success. Before I came on board, there wasn't really anyone on the team whose role it was to make sure that schedules were being made, plans were being put into place, people were being spoken to. When you're making a game, that's all you have time for. And all of the little things that go into running a business, essentially, there wasn't anybody dedicated to doing those things. So when I stepped into the team, I took care of all the things that they couldn't because they were too busy working on the game. Things like community engagement, making sure that everybody had work to do and that it was work that we needed to do, triaging tasks, making sure that we had plans for, okay, this is all the stuff that we're gonna do in this patch. Let's have a meeting about it. Let's figure out what we want to include, what we don't want to include, what's lower priority, and then execute and make sure that if there's any barriers, if there's anything in their way, if anybody's blocked, it gets taken care of by somebody who isn't them. So they can keep doing something else while someone else takes care of the problem for them.
Them's Fighting Herds would launch in early access on February 22nd, 2018. While the team is still developing and polishing the game for its 1.0 release, Them's Fighting Herds launch casts and multiplayer modes are fully playable right now. The decision to release their game early wasn't one they made lightly, however.
I am kind of on the fence about early access, even though it helps you. Like, sometimes it's what's necessary to actually keep going. Maybe you're out of money, maybe you need to go into early access to actually continue. But if the first impression is bad, it's gonna hurt your game in the long run. So you have to be careful when going into early access. You have to make sure that you at least have a product that people still enjoy to an extent, or can at least see the potential of, or else they're gonna say, wow, this sucks, I'm not coming back to it ever again. One of the things that is really helpful about early access is the feedback that you get. It does make the game far more polished, I think, than potentially a finished product would be that never had that sort of a close relationship with its audience, because you basically get to cheat in the sense that you see what your game is like in the wild before it's even finished. So you can proactively fix all the things that people who don't release it early access have to worry about after their game releases. And sometimes they don't have the resources to fix those things. So they're just like, well, I guess that's just the way it is.
A lot of the internal testing that we did was done with seasoned fighting game players. So it was me, my coworker Cam, and then at one point we hired Sonic Fox, and he was working on the project as an internal tester as well. We felt like we had a pretty good idea on what the meta was gonna be, but we didn't take into account how many of our fans were from the Brony community that weren't super into competitive fighting games. Maybe they had dabbled a little bit. So when the game went out into early access, people who had bought the game were playing it, but people who hadn't bought the game really weren't. And so an internal meta developed in the community that we didn't really foresee, and that changed a lot of what we thought the game was going to play like. And it's weird because you have to know, like, as a tournament player, I'm playing the game differently than some other people. So I know what the game could be, but you also have to balance the game based on how it's actually being played. Because if nobody's playing it that way yet, you can't really make changes for the future. You have to make the experience as fun as it possibly can be for your actual community of players. At first it was a little jarring because it was like, okay, you think you know a lot, but I need to check my ego at the door and let the people who actually play the game tell me what they think the problems are, and then we need to get into a community discussion of, we need to just sit down and triage the problems and see what we do about it. And we can't really force people to play a certain way. We can buff and nerf tools, but if people don't want to use those tools, even though we know they're good, we can bring a horse to water, but we can't make them drink. So we have to balance based on how people are playing.
The amount of instant feedback that we can get from players and fix things under the pretense of, it's not done yet, if we make something and it's a mistake, we'll fix it, it's fine, that's been incredibly valuable. Because we can always go back and say, the game's not done yet, I know this change is controversial, just bear with us, we'll fix it. So it allows us to get away with some things that bigger fighting games might not necessarily be able to get away with. I think that fighting game players are used to a certain amount of jank in their fighting games, but not only is this a fighting game, it's an artistic expression for us. So it's important that the little details are right. We care about people's experience top and bottom, even if you're just going through menus from anywhere into the fight. We want you to notice the little things and be charmed by them.
This is what I live for, honestly. Like, I've always loved just the mechanics behind things and how things work and how people interpret what they're seeing or just kind of playing around with. And getting all of this feedback in quick succession like that is a lot of fun. I guess I haven't really gotten to the point where like that kind of stuff would start to annoy me, because I love kind of hearing everyone's perspective on things, no matter how much experience they might have with a fighting game or our game in particular. Just that problem-solving aspect has been a lot of fun. It's great that we did end up going into early access. It was not really a thing that we wanted to do, because there were a lot of games that went into early access and just kind of sank into the swamp and didn't really have an end goal, didn't really have anywhere to go. It's a bit of a vacuum, but if you are ready for it and you're looking forward to it, I think it can be a whole lot of fun.
The thing that I get the most joy from in terms of working on games is just seeing people appreciate or find joy in something that you helped build. That's like the one thing I want most out of life, is like, I want to build something that brings entertainment to the world. I want to build something that people are thankful for. So anytime we got like an overwhelming positive response, it was just like, you know, it just felt really good, and it's good positive reinforcement. It made, you know, working on the project worth it.
Mane6 plans to move them's fighting herds from early access to 1.0 later this year, and in doing so, completing a journey 8 years in the making. It's no shock then, when asked about how they'll feel about when the work is done, each member expressed a bit of relief, but also kept an eye on the future. It's
almost surreal, I'll be honest. So much so that I tend not to even think about it anymore, because it blows my mind. And if I dwell on it too much, I can get stuck, you know, pondering for hours about how it all happened and how we got here and like where to go in the future. So I guess for now I'm just taking it as it comes, living in the moment. It's just awesome.
I'm very excited for this game to be out. I do feel a certain sense of pride in helping the game ship because this is what I've always wanted to do. I want to work for a small team. I want to make other people better at their jobs. And if I can get someone to the point where they can finish their product and feel proud of it, then I feel proud too.
I never thought that I would be able to have a job where a piece of creative art is made and I have my imprint on it and that it's released to the public and it's ever finished. And I want to see how far it goes. I hope everybody plays the game and tries it. Even if they don't like it, even if they don't buy it, I want everybody to try this game because once people pick it up and play it, they're like, yeah, this is really fun. I don't want to learn it, but it's fun. And to me, the I had a good time is the best compliment I can receive.
It's everything I could have ever hoped for, and then some. We've gone through a lot of troubles and came out the other end. I'm feeling kind of invincible, but we still need to make it across that finish line, and I can't wait for people to, experience some of the ideas we have, especially for the story mode. It really is just the beginning of a whole new process, and I cannot wait.
Thank you for watching our look into the making of Them's Fighting Herds. Our documentaries are 100% funded by our patrons, like these guys. So if you like what you've seen, consider subscribing or becoming a patron today. See you next time.